special guest in the studio at TheInformer is James O'Reilly, financial advisor. A very interesting time to talk about finances, especially as the COVID window, not winds down, but changes and evolves. James, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Interesting times. From your perspective, how do you see things? So many things that we took for granted 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months ago have changed and are evolving. How do you see things?
You've said it perfectly. There's a huge transition taking place here. I think not just in terms of people's expenses and people's lifestyles and people's employment, but just also in terms of people's expectations and how they've previously felt about, they might think they were in roles that were super secure, or my career is on exactly the path that I want it to be. So I think a lot of people have been blindsided a little bit by this.
So we've gone from a position of great surety, great confidence to, oh dear, what comes next? And you touched on something most precious, and that is the way we were thinking about our lives. Now, in Victoria especially, there's been a huge lockdown, and for 4 or 5 months, in 2 different lots, over 7 months, people have been locked down, which meant they couldn't do and they couldn't spend money the way they used to. But surveys are telling us that they've used money in a manner that very few saw coming. Clearly the sale of alcohol and liquor went through the roof. Gambling has gone through the roof, and Crown has been closed in Victoria. So it's extraordinary. What's it been? It's been the explosion of online access, hasn't it?
Yes.
So again, we're seeing the online businesses that were not marginal, but were just emerging. Suddenly there's been this catalyst, it's called COVID, and it's gone, wow, right through us. Yes,
financial habits have changed completely. People's financial habits have been turned on their heads. I'm talking with a lot of people now who are, when they're talking about their finances, they're saying, look, these are not normal times, and the things that they used to do from a discretionary perspective, the going out drinks with friends, those sorts of things, they're not happening anymore.
But does that mean they've squirreled it away?
Oh, no.
So what are we seeing?
Well, we're pretty consistently seeing people utilise that money for other things, for the most part.
Yeah.
Some people have been really intentional and said, no, we're going to build out savings nest or pay debt down or whatever, which I'm super pumped about for those people that have done it. But we're also meeting a lot of people that are acknowledging that their spending has changed, but hasn't necessarily improved.
So what sort of advice would you be keen to offer the client who's watching today on TheInformer, and they're coming through COVID, depending where they are in Australia, in Queensland, of course, if we can ever cross the border. Queenslanders will tell you they have a wonderful state, full of adventure, full of great tourism opportunities, but they're not going to be seeing too many people coming through the door at the moment because Anastasia Palaszczuk has decided to keep the borders closed. That appears to be the case too with WA. South Australia are a little bit more flexible. They want to be the state to be. How do you see things from that perspective?
Just so we're clear, are we talking about travel specifically?
Yeah, I'm talking about the way people plan ahead. As you said earlier, it was all about we knew we had a career, we knew we had a job. Suddenly, all of that has been swept away. And if it hasn't been lost, there are serious doubts about whether it can come back. So what do we say to people? How do we give them some hope, some things to target, some things to set in place, and to start growing again? Those little bits of that thing we call our nest egg for tomorrow.
I think overarchingly, the most important message is that it's not a time to be complacent. Where it's true that at face value, I think a lot of households are now thinking that, COVID's past us now, and so in 2021 is going to be our year, and we're going to get things back on track, and that sort of language. But what we often see as a result of economic crashes, the global financial crisis, .com bust, and then more recently with COVID, what we see is there's a lagging effect between when things happen at an economic level, like when we have when we have situations where we need government intervention, we have significant problems in our economy. There's a lagging effect between that time and unemployment rate, and so I'm seeking to encourage to a lot of our clients that we're not out of the woods yet. It might really feel like that being on the ground, but a lot of the unemployment or the employment that we have is still propped up to a degree by JobKeeper and those sort of initiatives. So when that rug gets pulled out in March 2021, we're going to have a whole new world again at that point. So now's not the time for complacency. Do your best to avoid having significant one-off costs right now. If you can, don't lock yourself into that significant monthly repayment by buying a new car, or even at a smaller scale, if you want to upgrade your phone plan, now's not the time to say yes to the $120 a month phone plan. Right now is a time to just float, for lack of a better word. Try to embed the best financial habits that you can over the short and medium term, and put yourself in a position where you're not going to feel some of those shock waves that are going to come through next year.
Are you a sailor?
No.
Because that's exactly the sort of advice. They say, batten down the hatches, ride out the storm. Now, the example you gave earlier, GFC, again, that was something that swept the world.
Yes.
But it was induced by a whole number of different influences. This has been a major global stall by governments across the world that saw a major health emergency upon them, and they shut everything down. Now, very different. If you shut things down, then it's incumbent on you to play your role and get things started again.
Yes.
Can you see the governments, and I mean state, local councils and federal government, playing a bigger role and a more substantial role than they've ever done before?
They have to, is the answer. I mean, we're in a lot more debt than we anticipated being in 24 months ago. We're very, very close to $1 trillion of net debt, which is hurtful. That
again,
said,
we shouldn't see it in the same light, though.
No, not at all. No,
had that been a government spending, and you were the opposition, you'd be saying, mate, this is manna from heaven. We're going to nail them to the cross.
It can't be done in this climate.
Whoever was in the chair is going to have to do a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah. The intervention that we've seen at a government level so far has really been centred around improving households. And that's why we've seen these initiatives that are centred around JobKeeper. We've seen these, and also JobSeeker. The goal has been to make sure that households manage this time. What we haven't necessarily seen is exactly how we're going to get out of this, and how healthy businesses typically means healthy economies. Healthy businesses also means healthy households, because unemployment has improved, people are more optimistic. So on the balance, I think that we're going to have a very, very interesting next 6 to 12 months as the governments do wrestle with where can we get the best bang for buck in terms of trying to make sure that we jumpstart this economy, but at the same time, let's not take our $1 trillion of debt to 1.5 trillion, let's not be excessive anywhere.
The Reserve Bank has played its bit by dropping interest rates even further. Now, if you're on a fixed income, that's the last thing you want to see, and that puts an enormous load on people who have to live through those times. For others, though, it means borrowing is going to be a little easier if you can get in. But again, so many other questions that have to be answered. What advice would you have as we wrap things up in this interview on The Informer? James O'Reilly's our guest, and a financial advisor. And what I'm trying to drag from James is the sort of thing we all need to be thinking about as we get closer to Christmas and as we prepare for 21. What sort of advice can you give us?
I'd suggest, more than anything, let's take stock of where we are financially. This is definitely a time to do a really good audit of your finances. Review the expenses that might have crept into your behaviours over the last 3 to 6 to 12 months. Are we going to carry these into 2021? As well as just being as well prepared as you can, not feeling like we're out of the woods, making sure that we do all the right things to keep our costs as low as possible. I know you did talk about the interest rates at the moment, and I think that that's a huge one because with lower rates has also provided some incredibly good home loan rates and investment loan rates. And as rates have come down, we've started to notice the difference between getting a good outcome at a mortgage level and a bad outcome is tremendous. Just yesterday I was talking with someone whose interest rates are, they're about 3.5%, and through seeing a mortgage broker making some changes, they're going to save about $6,500 in their own pocket every year just in interest by refinancing that loan. Gee whiz, that's a lot of money, for the effort that you put in to go through a refinance.
My first home was 18.5%. So imagine how things have changed.
Wildly.
And how the economy has changed and how attitudes change. So just thought I'd give you a refresher and a little perspective about how things can change tremendously. James, it's been terrific. Can we get you back to talk on a more regular basis about some of the things that we need to plan, some of the things we need to look out for, and how do we designate or how do we decide who's going to be our financial advisor going forward? Yay?
Would love to be here. Thank you.
All right. James O'Reilly on The Informer.